Part 267. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2666. Man Bao sat there until the sun went down and no one came to her to get the list back. Instead, the imperial physician's office became lively. Some of the students who had been notified to join the army were not willing. After all, joining the army was not a good thing. But it was soon learned that the female students over there had to accompany the whole class in the army, and they still automatically petitioned, and some of the students who complained were not easy to say. Someone spat directly, "Bah, it's still a man, and it turns out that it's not even as good as a woman." That's right, female students still have the courage to go to the front line. What should I be afraid of? Who said we were afraid? I didn't say I wouldn't go. Who just complained about the vulgarity in the army, and the army doctors are all swine killers. There was a lot of noise in the academy, but it was quickly settled down. A few people who were not on the list encouraged, "I also want to join the army, but I don't know why Mr. chooses you, but not us. If I sign up, I don't know if I may join the army." Go. I want to go too, I also want to. It's Mr. Joe who came to inform. Why don't we ask Mr. Joe? Go ask Mr. directly? Isn't that bad? What's wrong? Mr. Joe won't eat us. Let's go, let's ask now. Who wants to go to the front line with me? Let's ask Mr. Joe together. So I followed a group of people to find Joe Man. Some really wanted to go to the front line, some just pretended to be enthusiastic, and most of them were watching the excitement and wanting to find out. Watching the sunset, Man Bao took a deep breath and rolled up the list of medicinal herbs and various consumables she had listed this afternoon. She was about to leave, and before she went out, she saw the mighty students coming, many of them. Schoolgirl. Man Bao raised his eyebrows, put the list in his sleeve pocket, and then clasped his hands in front of his belly and stood on the steps waiting for them to come over. Xiao Tan and the others rushed out when they heard the movement, and stood with her in front of the door, frowning slightly, and when they got close, they asked, "What are you doing? You have finished your homework today? Will you review it again? Do you know how hard it is to be a doctor? If you can't learn the skills, it will kill people." The students shrank their necks, but they still stood still. They were about to talk at length, and the first student said loudly, "Mr. Tan, Mr. Joe, student Sumu pays respects to Mr. Joe Man knew him, she had taught him for 3 years, but didn't you graduate? Why are you still in the department?" Thai Dr. Xiao Tan said angrily, "He first learned acupuncture with you, and after graduation, he went to the local medical office, but he wrote back within half a year to report that he was not good at his studies, and he had to come back to study again. I don't know. How did he persuade Imperial Physician Lu to enroll him in a physical therapy class, and he entered the 4th grade directly. This year he is a 5th grader, and he has to study for another 3 years before he can graduate. All other subjects are 5-year courses. Because many selected students are illiterate or incomplete, they still need a 1-year to 2-year adaptation period, so students in other courses will also be divided according to their educational level. The number of semesters varies from 5 to 7 years for different classes. Only the physical therapy department has extremely strict requirements. All admitted students must not only be literate, but also give priority to students with medical background. This subject has the most students admitted, but the competition is also the most intense. In the past 2 years, there were 86 people competing for one admission spot. Only when they failed to enter the physical therapy department, students would fall back to the next choice. Other departments. Often, the subjects such as ulcer medicine, cursing, and massage are taken after the other subjects have been selected. Sometimes there are not enough students enrolled, so some students are admitted from the students who are willing to obey the adjustment. Under such circumstances, very few people can transfer from other subjects to physical therapy. At present, there are only 3 doctors Xiao Tan knows. One is Zheng Gu. He has the ability and could have prescribed a diagnosis. Graduating soon. One is Zhou Liru, she also has the ability, but she can turn around so smoothly because of Zhou Man's face. The last one is Su Mu. I heard that imperial physician Lu valued him very much and planned to include him in the gate wall. This is the inheritance of teachers. For example, Zheng Gu, Zheng Xiao, Lu Sunyang, and Zhou Liru have the meaning to Zhou Man. These 4 people have basically learned their profound skills from Zhou Man. Apprentice, Zhou Man is their ancestor. Thai Dr. Xiao Tan is implying the relationship between Fang Mu and Thai Dr. Lu. Man Bao nodded, his expression unchanged, and asked, "What's the matter with you bringing so many classmates here?" Fang Mu cupped his hands, looked serious, and said loudly, "I heard that Mr. Zhou is going to bring someone to the front line with the army." Man Bao nodded. He said solemnly, "The students are willing to go together, please count the students as one." Okay, Man Bao nodded without hesitation. Fang Mu, who prepared a lot of words and planned to make a generous statement, was stunned for a moment, then raised his hand in a bow, "Mr. Xie is complete." Man Bao nodded, turned around and entered the room, took out a pen and paper, swept around them condescendingly, then showed a bright smile, beckoned, "Come on, who else wants to go to the front line with the army, come up and sign up with me." The crowd was noisy for a while, most people hesitated, but some people raised their hands and shouted, "Sir, sir, I'm going, I'm you wrong, a 4th-year physical therapy student." Man Bao took a pen and wrote down his name. Thai Dr. Xiao Tan looked at her cold sweat and quickly grabbed her pen, "Master Zhou, this is a 4th grader, he has only learned to diagnose the pulse, and he can't even prescribe the prescription. What are you taking him for?" Man Bao said, "It's enough to know the medicinal materials and to know how to take the medicine. The rest can be taught temporarily. Since they have this heart, then we can't live up to them." The people below heard it and immediately coaxed, "Mr. Zhou, we are 3rd graders, so can we also go?" Man Bao smiled slightly and said, "Of course, any student who has passed the 2nd volume of pharmacy can go." Thai Dr. Xiao Tan couldn't make up his mind for a while, so he lowered his voice and asked, "What if I bring so many students there, what if something goes wrong?" Man Bao also lowered his voice and said, "Do you think I really don't pick them up and bring them all? Don't worry, these applicants will definitely be screened when they go to the front line. I don't have time to appease them, so I'm going. Yes, not to mention whether you can endure hardship, you must be tough. I don't want my students to be cut down as deserters before the wounded soldiers are rescued." The little Dr. Tan was relieved, let go of her pen and let her continue to write. No one heard what they said, so those who were thinking could not help asking loudly, "Sir, there must be a standard for this selection, why did you choose them before and not us, and now we sign up, but allow it we went." Next update around 10 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2667. Man Bayadao. All the selected students have learned the methods of ulcer medicine and have natural advantages in dealing with trauma. Of course, students from the physical therapy department and acupuncture department can also go if they want. You have also learned some related topics. Acupuncture and moxibustion are very effective means to stop bleeding. As for the students from other departments, Man Bao said after a pause, once there is a war, a large number of wounded soldiers are sent down, and many assistants are needed. Even if you have not learned the relevant skills and are willing to follow the army, you can also take medicine and boil it. Medicine, hand a knife, handkerchief, or something. So you want us to do chores? Many students looked at Zhou Man sadly, as if she was a heartless person. When these words came out, the number of people who were coaxing to go with them suddenly decreased by half, and the students who wanted to show off and left did not dare to act blindly, for fear that Zhou Manzan would take them to do chores, so the students dispersed, and after a while there are not many people left. Man Bao snorted twice, then turned back to the office. The other imperial physicians shook their heads slightly when they saw it, and followed Zhou Man back together. Imperial physician Xiao Tan was quite frightened, and said to her, "Imperial Dr. Zhou, it's time for the next I'll take a step first. You just make trouble, don't let him know, his little heart can't stand it." Man Bao immediately put away the things, "I'm leaving too." Zhou Liru and a few female students were waiting outside, and when they saw her coming out, they went up to meet her. "Little aunt, how's it going?" Man Bao said to her, "You prepare, we will set off with the army, it may not be a few days." Man Bao nodded to the other students, turned around and was about to leave, when he thought of something. He turned his head and said to them, "The school will be closed for a few days, no one will be allowed in and out, so please don't ask for leave." Zhou Liru was puzzled. Why? Of course it was because the Goguryeo messenger was still begging for peace. The news of the royal expedition has not been announced. Although many people in the court probably know it now, it will definitely not spread to the people, let alone the ears of the Goguryeo messengers. Sure enough, when the Honglu temple received the news, they immediately restrained the Goguryeo embassy on the grounds that the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet was approaching and Beijing was in a hurry to prevent them from going out and wandering around. Their carriage. The driver was naturally arranged by Honglu temple. This limited the scope of the activities of the Goguryeo embassy, so that they could know who they met every day and even what they said at Honglu temple. Gao Yu didn't expect to change so quickly in one day, so he couldn't help closing the door and discussing with others, "Is it true that the Dajin court is unwilling to accept our request for peace?" Ordinarily not. The emperors of the Jin dynasty have always advertised their kindness and kindness. We have all asked for peace. It is impossible for them not to agree. Maybe it was those treacherous officials who were blocking us, but unfortunately we were turned away. Even the officials at Honglu temple didn't want to see us, so we couldn't find out the news at all. The deputy envoy looked at Gao Yu and lowered his voice. "Five princes, you studied in the Imperial College, you should have close friends, right? Why don't you ask them to inquire?" "Gao Yudao, most of my classmates in that class have already gone to work and are not in Beijing. There are not many students who can stay in Beijing as soon as they leave office. Among them, the most students are Qiuazixiu and Taixiu, and the 4 schools he is in are basically outsourced." Gao Yu naturally asked someone to inquire about the classmates he had a good time with in private, but unfortunately, they were all released. "What can I do about this? Could it be that the 5th prince has been in the capital for so many years, doesn't he even have personal connections? Or is he unwilling to contribute to the country?" Gao Yu was angry. Where has he been in the capital for so many years? It was clear that he had only been in Beijing for 2 years. If the big brother hadn't instigated the big king to move troops against Dajin, he wouldn't have been sent back if he did well in school. He is still a hostage in the great Jin kingdom, and they start a war regardless of his life or death. Have these ever considered him? But Gao Yu was only angry in his heart. He said blankly, "I am incompetent, then the deputy envoy will do the rest, and this king will wait for the good news from the deputy envoy at the station." The deputy envoy was also very angry in his heart, and of course his face was also angry, but he quickly endured it, lowered his head and said, "It's because the lower official is reckless, but I am also worried about the kingdom, and also ask the 5th prince not to have the same knowledge as me. The top priority is let Dajin agree to our request for peace." Gao Yu lowered his eyes and thought for a moment, then got up and said, "I will find a way, get ready, we will continue to kneel at the palace gate tomorrow. But tomorrow, the officials of Dajin will prepare for the festival and will not go to court. Tomorrow is 14. Gao Yudao, tomorrow and the day after tomorrow are the last 2 days. If we still don't get the invitation to the banquet at the Grand Jin Palace before sunset, then the matter of seeking peace will be suspended. So no matter if there is anyone going to the court tomorrow, we have to go and kneel. Gao Yu turned around and left. He angrily pushed open the other door. After entering, he turned his head to look at Lu Mian, who was behind, and said displeasedly, "What are you doing? Why don't you come in quickly?" Lu Mian could only go in, closed the door and stood with his hands down. Gao Yu asked, "What did Princess Changjiao say?" Lu Mian said, "Prince, I haven't seen Princess Changjiao, and the people in the princess mansion are only willing to leave my greetings." Gao Yu frowned, "You didn't let them know?" Lu Mian lowered his eyes and said, "They went to spread the word, but they just left the salutation." In other words, Princess Changjiao didn't want to see them. "I can't even see my face?" Gao Yu was indignant, clenched his fists and said, "I heard that Princess Changjiao Suxi is eating outside. Tomorrow is August 14th, the street will be very lively, there will be a lot of delicious food, she will definitely come out. You go to the street guard, be sure to see Princess Changjiao." He stared at him and said, "At all costs." Lu Mian could only respond. But Gao Yu did not intend to hang herself on a tree in Princess Changjiao, so he said with a sullen face, "Tomorrow I will take someone to Chongyuan Square. Bai Shan gave me a doorpost back then, but fortunately I have been asking people to keep it. It's finally useful today." At this time, Princess Changjiao was meeting the servants from the palace, and she asked in surprise, "Imperial father wants to go on a personal expedition?" "Yes," the servant said with a smile, "don't worry, princess, our emperor is wise and talented, and a Koguryo is just a mere hand." He said, "However, although your majesty is very talented, there are also some difficulties. You know, the treasury is a little short, so the Queen Mother planned to raise a military fund for His Majesty, and it doesn't need much, but the hospital has to bring a group of people accompany the army, the silver needles, gauze, linen, catgut, some knives, scissors and the like are needed, and the cost of medicinal materials will be even greater, so the Empress wants to invite the princesses to enter tomorrow. The palace is discussing the matter of raising money. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2668. Chang Yu understood and asked, "The Queen Mother only invited people from our generation, or did you even invite all the ants?" The maid smiled and said, "It's not good for the other princesses, but the eldest princesses may not have enough money, and the Empress doesn't want to make them spend money, so I only sent the post, and it was limited to these few families in Beijing, just give a few taels of silver at will. As for the princesses, tomorrow will be 14, the mother means, just in time for a reunion dinner. That is to say, the queen only intends to pick up the wool of her daughters, and does not intend to ask for money from her sisters." Chang Yu understood, nodded, and said, "Okay, tomorrow night, my concubine and I will definitely enter the palace to accompany the father and mother." The waiter then left with a smile. Princess Changjiao thought for a while, and asked the maid to get the money. By the way, she opened her jewelry box and picked out some jewelry that she didn't like very much. She ordered, "Go find a box." Princess Changjiao put the jewelry in, raised her chin slightly and said, "Take all these tomorrow. Donate to the queen to prepare military funds. The maid should come down. And the Princess Mingdan next door is also looking for things, not to mention gold and silver, there are some things they don't need, or things they don't like very much." Bai Erlang rolled up his sleeves and personally rummaged through boxes and cabinets, and ordered several pieces of cloth that he didn't like. All of them could be sold, and one piece could be sold for 20 or 30 taels, and he could buy a lot of medicinal materials. Mingda also opened her jewelry box. Bai Erlang went over to look at it. She took out one piece and he put it in the big box on the other side. After a long time, there were only 2 gold hairpins in the small box. It was because the style was not good. Just let it go. Mingda looked at him helplessly, and Bai Erlang said, "These are all good looking, otherwise we will go back to Joe's house tomorrow. My mother left a lot of things before she left. Her jewelry is all old, so take her credit for it." Mingda, mother-in-law would kick you out if she knew. No, the big deal is that we can buy some new jewelry for my mother. If she knows you donate such a good thing, she will feel distressed. Mingda couldn't help but said, "Isn't that for raising military funds? I didn't see you saying anything when I donated money." "That's money, not jewelry," Bai Erlang said, "the two are different. These jewelry have to be sold at a discount before they can be exchanged for money. If it's really bad, that's fine, but I see the jewelry is not bad, the craftsmanship is also good, and it is all given to you by your majesty and the empress, so I am distressed to sell it at a discount." Mingda was stunned for a moment, then laughed, lowered his eyes and thought about it, then nodded and said, "Okay, then let's donate more money, and mother-in-law's jewelry should be kept." Bai Erlang said, "I'll go back tomorrow to have a look. It just so happens that the Mid-Autumn Festival is coming, so let's go back and give some moon cakes to my uncle." Mingda immediately said, "I have 2 boxes of good tea here, and I will send a box to my uncle and grandmother tomorrow." Bai Dalan was released, and Mr. Bai and Mrs. Bai returned to their hometown. Now Bai Erlang's relatives in the capital are also the Bai Shan family. Well, there is also the Bai family's family who don't communicate much. Mingda has a good relationship with Man Bao, and even has a good relationship with Mrs. Liu's Zheng family. After all, they are elders, and Mingda respects them very much. So early the next morning, they went out with the Mid-Autumn Festival ceremony, and then bumped into the frame of Princess Changjio's family. Princess Changjio's frame was chasing up from behind. Anyway, there were only 2 of them in the street, so she was domineering and directly took up the other half of the road, side by side with Mingda's frame. She raised the curtain and shouted, "Here, Mingda, what are you doing this early in the morning?" Mingda opened the curtain, and Chang Yu saw Bai Erlang, who was almost falling asleep in the car. Mingda smiled and said, "Let's go to Joe's house to give a gift. Where's my sister?" Chang Yu was stunned for a moment and then said, "I will also go back with my concubine to give the boxing gift. I have to have lunch with my parents-in-law. Isn't Master Bai returning to his hometown?" Mingda said, "I'm going to give a gift to my uncle and grandmother." How many floors were there? Chang Yu was a little envious. Where is this to give a boxing gift? He is obviously looking for Zhou Man to play. She was speechless. Wei Yu smiled and said, "After lunch, the princess should also go to see Lord Zhou and Lord Bai. Speaking of which, our 2 families are not far away. I wonder if our sudden visit will be troublesome." "No, no." Bai Erlang woke up when Chang Yu was talking, and was lying at the window and said to Wei Yu and his wife, "You just go, I will ask Bai Shan and the others to prepare more food. At the moment in the open house at home is when it is cool, and my aunt has planted a lot of chrysanthemums, just in time to enjoy the chrysanthemums and drink tea." Bai Erlang said with curved eyebrows, "You don't know, my uncle and grandmother had people dug a lotus pond in their village last year. They wanted to pick lotus and eat lotus root, but this year it was a little dry, the water was not deep, and the place where the pond was dug, it's mostly sandy soil, so my uncle asked people to raise some crabs in the lotus pond. Now is the time to eat crabs. I don't know if Zhuangzi sent them to the family. If so, you can eat crabs when you come." Chang Yu's eyes were bright when he heard it, and he immediately grabbed Wei Yu's arm. Wei Yu nodded with a smile, "Let's go." Chang Yu was a little cowardly to Wei Ji, so he whispered, "Where is the father-in-law?" Wei Yu whispered, "I'll go talk." Chang Yu was satisfied. When they reached the intersection and entered another square, The two carriages could not run side by side, so Changio's carriage was one step behind. Pedestrians on the street also began to increase. There are more people here, and it is close to Dongxi. Some people set up stalls by the roadside. Chang Yu sat by the window and looked at the things outside without blinking. Seeing her reluctant expression, Wei Yu couldn't help but hesitate. Do you want to eat some? Chang Yu immediately said, okay. She immediately patted the wall of the carriage to stop the carriage. She pointed to a table of guests on the bread shop and said, is that roasted persimmon? I want to eat roasted persimmon. Their group stopped, and they were completely separated from the people in Princess Mingda's mansion. The people in the princess mansion on both sides were not surprised by the situation, and they went back to their respective houses and did their own things, and they did not wait for it. When Lu Mian dawdled to the street, he looked up and saw the couple standing in front of the booth. Wei Yu was holding a plate in his hand and was carefully holding the reed pipe to let Princess Changio suck the persimmons out. Soup, and then let her eat the roasted persimmon meat nicely and elegantly. The guard who followed Lu Mian also saw it, and immediately reminded him, Lu Gongzi, the princess is there, hurry up. Lu Mian, didn't you see the concubine and the princess together? The guard said indifferently, so what, does he have a good-looking son? With you, the princess won't give him a look. Lu Mian, what if you don't want to go up? But this was not something he could decide. Seeing that he was slow to move, the guard even stretched out his hand to push him and said, young Master Lu, the prince had an explanation before he came out. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2669. The coachman who was squeezed behind by the crowd and the Goguryeo guard slammed up and stared at them. Young Master Lu, there is no silk and satin you are looking for here, there are small vendors here, and the shop is over there. The guard blocked him and said, our son wants to eat steamed buns, you are the driver, just take care of the carriage. After speaking, he held Lu Mian and walked towards Bayaziphu. The guards of the princess mansion are not fools, they will not stop the princess from communicating with the commoners, but these people who come here are obviously not commoners. Not to mention Lu Mian's face is barely familiar, and the guards on his left and right are all armed with knives, so someone immediately stepped forward to block them, frowned and asked, who is coming? The guard pushed Lu Mian and looked at him warningly. Wei Yu and Princess Changio turned their heads and looked over. Changio was still pecking at the persimmon flesh in his mouth, and seeing Lu Mian almost squirted the persimmon flesh out of his mouth. But she held back, but she couldn't help coughing. Wei Yu quickly took out the handkerchief and gave it to her. Chang Yu covered her mouth, so she didn't lose her temper in public. The palace maids behind her were also startled when they saw Lu Mian, and looked at Wei Yu with a guilty conscience. Chang Yu wiped his mouth and looked over. Lu Mian has been waiting quietly, and when Chang Yu looks over, he bows his hands and salutes. Student Lu Mian sees the princess, are you okay? Wei Yu stared at Lu Mian's face. Princess Changio likes good-looking people, he has heard rumors like this one, a bit familiar. Wei Yu's memory is still good, what's more, both of them were classmates of Qiaozijian, although he was in Qiaozixu at the time, while the other was studying in Simonxu. Wei Yu remembered it, suddenly realized, and said with a smile, Your Excellency is the messenger of Goguryeo. Lu Mian nodded yes, and looked at Princess Changio with bright eyes. Princess Changio. Wei Yu also turned to look at Princess Changio and asked her in a low voice, does the princess know? Princess Changio said, I've met you a few times. She nodded reservedly to Lu Mian, grabbed the plate still in the hands of the concubine and handed it to the maid, asking her to return it to the shopkeeper, then picked up her skirt and said, let's go, the father-in-law and mother-in-law are still waiting for us at home. She stood in front of the stool, raised her chin slightly at Wei Yu, raised her hands slightly, and motioned for him to hold her. Wei Yu couldn't help but bowed her head and smiled, stepped forward to support the princess' hand, and helped her onto the carriage, then turned around and bowed to Lu Mian, and then stepped on the stool to get on the carriage. Lu Mian opened his mouth, but was speechless for a while, and after thinking for a moment, he lifted his foot and stepped back 2 steps to make way for them. When the guard saw it, he was unwilling, and kept hinting at him to go up and say something. Lu Mian frowned slightly, but remained silent. After the princess's carriage left, he said before the guards got angry, "You have seen the attitude of the princess, and it will only add to the disgust, and it will only be harmful to what the prince is going to do, and it will not be beneficial." He added, "What's more, looking at the details of how the princess and the concubine get along, it's obviously not something that I, who have only met a few times, can compare." Princess Changjia was really interested in him. What a great opportunity for him to study in the 4 schools back then, but she never behaved beyond the rules. No patience. Chang Yu, who was sitting in the car, straightened her back and said nothing. Wei Yu poured a cup of tea, and placed a cup in front of Chang Yu. She poured a cup and raised her eyes to look at her. "What's wrong with the princess? Seems nervous." Princess Changjia snorted coldly, raised her chin proudly and said, "What am I nervous about? If the concubine has anything you want to ask, just ask." Wei Yu shook his head and smiled, "No." Princess Changjia frowned, "No." Wei Yu smiled and said, "Yes, no." He joked, "The princess was just stunned when she saw young Master Lu just now, and she still remembers my concubine. I remember that when the princess saw Lord Yang before, she didn't blink, and she even left the minister to ignore it for a while." He smiled and said, "I should be glad that it was Lu Mian who came today, not Lord Yang." Princess Changjia's cheeks were flushed, and she couldn't help shouting loudly, "When did I see Lord Yang forget you? That's too much, let's not talk about what happened before the marriage. After they got engaged, this happened twice. What Wei Yu remembers most is the smallpox in Xiaohu that year, and Yang Heshu was born in Xia. State rushed back to plead guilty. At that time, when he entered the palace to pay New Year's greetings to the emperor, he watched Yang Heshu enter the Taiji Hall from the gate of the palace to plead guilty. Princess Changjia, who rarely came to the Taiji Hall, took Princess Mingda and stood under the porch to look at him. His eyes were red, and he walked over to her. She stood beside her for a long time and she didn't notice. Chang Yu also remembered this, looked away with some guilty conscience, then turned back, and said fiercely to him, "Master Yang is good looking, so I just like to see him, okay?" Wei Yu smiled and nodded, "Okay." It was only after he got married that he slowly figured out Chang Yu's temperament. The maids and even the maids serving in the house in their courtyard were better looking than those in other places. So, what does he care about? At this time, Princess Mingda and Bai Er, who had just arrived at the gate of Zhou's house, also encountered a blocker. No, they encountered a blocker. There was a carriage and several horses parked directly in front of Zhou's house, and a man who looked like an attendant was talking to the concierge. The group stopped here, directly blocking their frame. Bai Erlang lifted the curtain and looked forward. The concierge over there had already discovered their frame. Row was because he had a good temper. At this time, he couldn't help being tough, and said to the entangled followers, "We will send the post in. But today is 14, my master really has no time to welcome guests, the master of your house might as well go back first, and when my master reads the post, he will send someone to invite him." After he finished speaking, he ignored him, turned his head and shouted from inside, "Come out to pick up someone, Master Tang and the princess are back." After saying that, he pushed the entourage away and trotted to meet him. When he ran to the front of the car, he bent over and smiled and said, "Second young master, are you back?" First of all, our young master said that the second young master will definitely come back today. Really? So is he ready to eat? Bai Erlang raised his chin slightly, looked forward, and asked, "Who is that in front?" Just as he was asking, the entourage over there also trotted back to the carriage to report, then the curtain was lifted and one person got out of the carriage. Bai Erlang has only seen Gao Yu 2 or 3 times, and he has long since forgotten about him, so he glanced at him and looked away, and asked the doorman, "Who is this person?" The concierge said depressedly, "It is said that he is a friend of the young master, and he still holds the old doorpost of the young master in his hand. He also said that he used to be a classmate, but the young man asked someone to go in and ask, and the inside told him that he is not free to welcome guests today. Second son, you don't know." "Impossible, aren't the young master's friends and classmates the second son's friends and classmates?" See you at 9. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2670. Gao Yu smiled and stepped forward, saluting, "Second Master Bai, stay safe." Bai Erlang looked at him blankly, and asked inexplicably, "Who is your excellency?" "Jiu." He smiled faintly and said, "My friend from Gao, a native of Goguryeo, was studying in the Imperial Academy before. I wonder if second young master Bai still remembers." "Oh, so it's Prince Hai." Bai Erlang hurriedly returned the salute. After thinking about it, he felt that it was rude to return the salute in the carriage. He was hesitating whether to jump out of the carriage. Gao Yu, who was standing in front of the frame, sighed and retracted his head. Bai Erlang was facing the door, and when she probed her head, she could see it clearly. His eyes widened, and he didn't know what to say for a while. Gao Yu was already reminiscing about the past, and then smiled. "I remember that Lord Zhou was very interested in my local products from Goguryeo. This time I came to the capital, and I brought some here, thinking of giving some to Lord Zhou to make, Lord Bai, the Mid-Autumn Festival, but..." He glanced at the doorman with a wry smile and said, "It seems unfortunate today, or Lord Zhou and Lord Bai don't want to be involved with me, a poor prince, so..." Bai Erlang is not a fool. He can't help but frown when he hears this. Princess Mingda, who has been sitting in the car, suddenly knocked on the wall of the car and said softly, "Consort, are we not going in yet?" Bai Erlang immediately smiled and said, "It's coming." He and Gao Yu said, "It's really unfortunate today. It happens to be August 14th. If Prince Gao came to the door 2 days earlier, even if he came to the door yesterday, even if he didn't send the post in advance, I think the family would treat him seriously." He smiled and said, "Because there will be a palace banquet tomorrow night, so today is a reunion banquet for many families, and the family is preparing to take care of their relatives, so..." Just as he was talking, Zhou Man finally found Bai Shan, and the two came together. Bai Shan smiled and said, "Prince Gao." Bai Shan nodded slightly to Bai Erlang and said sideways, "Prince Gao sits down in the lobby first. I have arranged for the princess and the concubine to come." Obviously, he didn't plan to refuse to go out anymore, otherwise Gao Yu would stay outside and refuse to leave would be a trouble. Gao Yu said with a face of shame, "I didn't think about it carefully. I didn't think that Master Bai would greet relatives and friends today. Prince Gao is unfamiliar with my Central Plains customs, which is forgivable. It's also because I didn't wait for the reception well, so please come in quickly." Bai Shan nodded to Man Bao, and sent Gao Yu to the lobby to sit down first, and then he pleaded guilty and left temporarily after being served tea. As soon as Man Bao waited for him to enter the door, the carriage and people in front moved away, and she let Bai Erlang and their carriages enter through the side door. Entering the big yard where they used to get on and off the bus, Princess Mingda got out of the car, and Man Bao stretched out his hand to support her. The two simply held hands and talked. "What is Gao Yu doing here?" Man Bao said, "Let's inquire about the news. It is impossible to ask us to intercede. After all, we are small and humble." Mingda couldn't help laughing when she heard the words, and went to the inner courtyard with her. "Even if I just wanted to inquire about the news, I'm afraid I'm delusional now. Mingda thought, well, Gao Yu did have a delusion after seeing the princess frame. He originally just wanted to come to Bai Shan and Zhou Man to inquire about De Jin's attitude and see if he could find some way to enter the palace banquet through the two of them. But today I actually met the princess. Gao Yu thinks this is God's will. Bai Shan also felt that it was God's will, and said to Man Bao, God's will has made us suffer more today. He got stabbed when he caught crabs in the morning, but today he met Jiao for a visit. Man Bao laughed and pushed him forward. You're amazing, get him away. Bai Shan said, you go with me. Man Bao shook his head, forget it, I don't like Jiao, I want to go to the garden with Mingda to see chrysanthemums, take Bai Er there. When Bai Shan thought about it, Gao Yu saw the princess frame, and he would definitely think that the drunkard didn't want the wine, so why not drag the wine too? Well, although this wine is wine mixed with water, it is also real wine, isn't it? So Bai Shan dragged the confused Bai Erlang over. No matter how ambitious you are, the other party's knowledge is no better than Bai Shan's, his eloquence is no better than Bai Shan's, and he is no better than Bai Erlang's refusal. Gao Yu brought a lot of things. In addition to the precious medicinal materials of Goguryeo, there were also some pearls and treasures of gold and silver, which were originally used for a relationship. As long as Bai Shan can help to speak well with the princess, they would have a chance to enter the palace. Attend a banquet. Bai Shan pushed the gift back and said with a smile, no merit and no reward, Prince Gao is already very moved to pay homage to him during the festive season. How dare he receive such a heavy gift again? He waved outside the hall, and immediately someone brought 2 gift boxes. He smiled and said, these are moon cakes made at home, and some crabs raised in Zhuangzi, not good things, but they are all timely things. I hope Prince Gao doesn't mind. The expression on Gao Yu's face could hardly be maintained. He took a deep look at Bai Shan and got up to leave without even taking the 2 gift boxes. The servant couldn't help looking at Bai Shan. Master, this. It seems that Prince Gao doesn't like this small gift, then forget it, take out the things, and bring them to entertain guests later. Bai Shan said, you took the crabs to wash before the kitchen was on the stove? Get the pot. Bai Erlang asked, how many have you caught, and how few are they? Even to open the crab in the gift. Bai Shan said, how many lotus ponds can you support? He said, I sent some to Shuexiang Tang, and my brothers-in-law. Oh, yes, I also prepared a copy for you and Princess Changjiao's mansion, so there's not much. Bai Shan didn't say much, and the kitchen still steamed several cages, because Mr. Zhuang was going out to meet guests today, and he was going to the wild. It was not easy to bring this thing raw, so he let people steam it, and then put it in the food box to keep it warm, so you can eat it warm wherever you go. Bai Erlang was very excited, and then he remembered, Princess Changjiao said that she and her concubine will come over after lunch at the Wei family's house. Come on, crabs can still manage enough. After all, he was raised by his own family, and although he was divided up a lot, Bai Shan didn't feel bad at all. Bai Erlang said, it's a pity that the land in Huangzhuang that your majesty gave is too good, otherwise we could dig a pond to raise some crabs. Bai Shandao, whether the crabs are well raised not only depends on the ground, but also on the water. The water is good in your place, otherwise you will find a piece of land to dig and add sand and rocks underneath. Bai Erlang's eyes lit up slightly and bumped his shoulder, you still have a lot of ideas. I don't know how to raise crabs, so I just suggested that, so if it doesn't work in the end, it's still something to raise dead, don't blame me. Okay, I don't blame you, just remember to leave some for me every year. Speaking of crabs, it's still delicious from Tehu Lake, Bai Shan asked, is there no tribute from the palace this year? Your Majesty asked the Empress to order a ban. It was the ban in the palace, so Bai Erlang knew, it is said that the people's livelihood is difficult this year, and it is not worth it to waste the people and waste the money for the cream of the two chopsticks. See you tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2671. Gao Yu angrily returned to the station, only to see Lu Mian in the room, frowning slightly. Why did you come back? He came back earlier than him. Lu Mian came back early, and he drank 2 pots of tea. Hearing the words, he briefly reported what happened in the morning. The main idea was that it was not that he did not work hard, but that Princess Changjiao was married now, which was different from before. And the concubine was with him at that time. Things were not going well today. Gao Yu and Bai Shan drank tea for 3/4 of an hour. You came and I talked for a long time, but I still didn't even find out the current wind direction of Dejin. Gao Yu was so angry that he waved and swept everything on the table to the ground. The people downstairs who had been listening with their ears pricked up immediately went to Honglu Temple quietly to report. I went to Chongyuan Square to visit Master Zhou and Master Bai, but the post was rejected at the beginning, and who knew that I was encountering Princess Mingda and the concubine went back to visit their relatives, and they were immediately blocked. The little ones couldn't follow into the lobby. I don't know what they were talking about, but the few boxes that Prince Gao brought were carried out as they were. When they came out, they were so angry that they even smashed things when they went upstairs. The official of Honglu Temple snorted coldly. Zhou Man has always been favored, so Bai Shan is not slippery regardless of his qualifications. Now that His Majesty intends to target Goguryeo, how can the two of them give Gao Yu's face? What about the other side? He asked. Then young Master Lu went to see Princess Changjiao, but only said hello on the street. Princess Changjiao and the concubine ignored him and didn't even say a word. The officials of Honglu Temple were satisfied, nodded, and said, "Very good, keep an eye on them, including their people. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, these people will no longer be under our control. Today is a holiday, but many people are not allowed to rest, including the Emperor and Wei Ji." In the corners that Bai Shan and the others could not see, the Emperor directly issued military orders and sent them to the generals, dispatching 40,000 troops from Zhang, Huai, Ling, 11 and other places, and sending 60,000 troops from Liaodong. The Ministry of Household was the busiest, the troops and horses were not ready, and the food and grass were first. They had to raise military provisions, but now that the autumn harvest was over, the Ministry of Household directly dispatched officials to go to Hebei Road first to raise military provisions. This year, the Jiangyi area and the south were somewhat affected by disasters, but the weather in the north was relatively smooth, and another copy of the treasury was transferred, and the early military rations came out. Everyone was so busy that they almost forgot that today was the 14th, or whether the servants of each family entered the imperial city to call for people, indicating that it was time to go back for a reunion. Wei Ji was also called, because after Princess Changjiao entered the palace to accompany the emperor in the evening, she could also have a reunion dinner at noon. Wei Ji went home full of state affairs. He used to keep his face low when he thought about things, and he didn't like to talk. Not only Princess Changjiao, but even Wei Yu didn't dare to disturb him at this time, so everyone had a dull meal. After the reunion dinner, Wei Yu immediately found an excuse to pull the princess away. Wei Ji was too lazy to greet them, wishing they could go as far as he could. He would have to deal with official business later, so he waved at them and told them to leave quickly. Mrs. Wei watched them leave eagerly, and couldn't help but turn around and pat Wei Ji. "Today is a reunion banquet, there is only one child in the capital, you still haven't left anyone." Wei Ji hissed, I see, don't you also want to enter the palace during the palace banquet? That is to say, our family is reunited, and it's the same when we meet again. Princess Changio, who came out of the Wei residence, let out a long breath, patted her chest and said, "The father-in-law is more terrifying than the mother-in-law." Wei Yu said with a smile, "I'm talking nonsense, what's so scary about my father?" He helped Princess Changio into the car. "Let's go to Zhou's house." The concierge of Zhou's house knew in advance that they were coming, and as soon as they saw their frame, they immediately removed the door and let their frame go in. Princess Changio got out of the car, looked around and asked, "Where's your master?" The porter immediately smiled and said, "In the garden at the back, someone has already informed me. But the house is too big, and even if the servants fly over, it will take time, and the delay is not short." Princess Changio said directly, "There is no need for them to pick it up, we will go over by ourselves. It's not the first time anyway." The two sides finally met in the corridor past the main courtyard. Princess Changio smelled the crabs on them, and immediately stepped forward to hold Zhou Man. "Have you eaten?" Man Bao smiled and said, "No, but the crab pot is warm and smells like it's on the side." Princess Changio was happy, and went to the garden with Man Bao hand in hand. The garden was full of purples and bright reds. Madame Lu and Xiao Qian were both there, but they had just shared several tables. Princess Bai Shan and the others were at the other end of the hall, separated by a screen. Everyone got up and greeted Princess Changio. Princess Changio greeted her with a smile all the way. After sitting in the chair, she saw that many people over there were getting up and leaving, and she couldn't help but ask, "How did they leave?" Man Bao said, "They are all full, and they have to go back to take a nap. Let's eat by ourselves." The servants brought the plates to pick up the crabs, while the Western cakes led the people to dig out the orange flesh and season the plates. Nowadays, when people eat crabs, they like to mash the fresh orange pulp into mud, make it into orange jelly and eat it, which is very refreshing and refreshing. After Princess Changio cleaned her hands, she stretched out her hand and took a crab. She didn't let the maid serve it, so she opened the crab shell and saw a lot of yellow paste inside. She smiled proudly, "I have good luck." Mingda can testify on this point. From childhood to adulthood, she has the best luck when eating crabs in the palace. The royal father likes to order her sister to break crab shells. Although the crabs sent to the emperor were carefully selected, they must be good, but there will be some subtle differences between good and good. It was the first time that Man Bao knew about eating crabs and luck, so he reached out and grabbed one. She looked at it carefully before breaking it apart. Bai Shan said, "This is good, we can see who of the two of you has better luck." As soon as he closed it, Man Bao opened the crabs full of yellow. Chang Yu was stunned, and Mingda opened his mouth wide. Bai Erlang had long since noticed it, and said to Zhou Man, "Choose one for me. It's not necessarily the best choice for you, I'll just give it to you." Bai Shan said, "None of the people here are outsiders. You have all picked the good ones. Who will eat the rest?" Everyone looked at the quiet Wei Yu. "Wei Yu, why?" Man Bao had already given the crab to Bai Erlang. She reached out to touch another one, opened it, and it was still full of yellow. She said with a smile, "It's because my grandmother chose it well, these crabs are all carefully selected. After all, it was meant to entertain the princess, and it couldn't be delivered just by catching it. They were all carefully selected by the people in the kitchen." Man Bao dug out the yellow of the chopsticks, dipped it in the orange juice, and put it in his mouth. His eyes almost glowed. It was delicious. See you tomorrow, really see you tomorrow. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2672. Crabs are cold in nature. Although they are delicious, they don't dare to eat more. Especially Mingda, she only ate one, but Man Bao and Chang Yu were okay because of their health, so they picked two in a row. Although he was still in the mood, he still gave up. "Stay healthy, you will have a long time in Japan. After eating crabs, Man Bao took them to the guest room to rest. The three of them sat cross-legged on the couch, all a little sleepy. Chang Yu looked around and saw that there were only the three of them and the maid who served him in the room, so he lowered his voice and said, "Guess who I met on the street today?" Man Bao yawned, put the pillow on the couch on the other end, leaned down directly, closed his eyes and said, "Have you met Lu Mian?" Chang Yu stared, "How do you know?" Mingda said, "Because we met Jiu. Change Jiu. Seriously, among them, the one with the closest relationship with the Goguryeo messenger is Change Jiu. Man Bao has also met each other 2 or 3 times. If he hadn't had a good memory, he would have forgotten who they were. After all, Chang Yu has seen a few more people. Since Gao Yu had even found out the doorposts that Bai Shan had given him in the past, it makes no sense not to send someone to follow the path of the more familiar Princess Change Jiu. Man Bao lifted his eyelids a little and asked, "What did you tell him? Wasn't the concubine always by your side today?" "I didn't say anything," Chang Yu said, "I just asked him to bow." She hummed, "I'm not stupid. What good can he do when he comes to the door at this time?" Seeing that she could figure it out on their own, Mingda and Man Bao nodded approvingly. Chang Yu frowned, "Why can't Goguryeo always live peacefully? What's the point of always trying to occupy our land?" Man Bao said, "That is a vassal state. Originally, the land it occupies is integrated with the Central Plains. Your Majesty has all the people in his heart. Whether it is Han, Turk, or He people, they are all the people of Jin. There are less people from the same clan than them, and His Majesty wants to take back the territory that Goguryeo has divided up, and Goguryeo naturally wants to occupy the Central Plains." Although the war was indeed provoked by Goguryeo, Manbao did not intend to beautify the emperor. The unification of the world is the general trend. If they follow the rules and the two sides are at peace, His Majesty may not fight them, but as time goes by, the country will, after the army is strong and strong, it will still be unified. It's just too early now. Chang Yu frowned, "It's just a small piece of land, I saw it on the map, it's about the size of my thumb, and there are Silla and Baikya to the south of Goguryeo, what's there to grab?" Man Bao closed his eyes and said, "Don't underestimate Goguryeo. There are a lot of Han people in it. In terms of intelligence, they are not much weaker. And they have 600,000 soldiers and horses, which is quite a lot." Even Mingda was surprised, "So many?" Man Bao nodded. "Bai Shan said that the people of their country are fierce, and young men must learn to kill, and almost everyone can be a soldier." Minda worried, "How long will this take?" "I don't know, but it's almost winter, it will last 2 or 3 months at most. If it doesn't come down, it may be another year next year." Man Bao got a little bit of energy, sat up, and said in a low voice, "I see your Majesty's determination this time. It's very strong, maybe it's also annoyed by Goguryeu's backtracking. Originally, the relationship between the two parties was good a few years ago. The Imperial College has accepted your prince as a student, but when you turn around, you will attack our country. If you can't beat it, then kneel down and beg for mercy, we all kindly let you go." How long has it been, turned around and reversed, no matter how good the emperor's temperament is, it will be worn away. Chang Yu took her hand and said, "Man Bao, you have to come back safely." Man Bao said confidently, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor, and I don't go to the front line, I only save people from below." "That's what you said, but swords and guns have no eyes, who knows?" Mingda asked, "How many guards are you taking with you this time?" "This time, it is with His Majesty's personal expedition, and it is not my chief officer. I definitely can't bring too many." "Ding Tian can bring 2 guards," Man Bao said, "it depends on the quota given above." "Yes, each official has a fixed number of family members and servants. Although you are responsible for their food and drink, can you carry dry food for 2 or 3 months when you go out for 2 or 3 months?" Shouldn't it be funded by the Ministry of Households? So they must limit the number of places. Otherwise, whoever is greedy for life and fear of death will bring more than 100 guards. Does the Ministry of Household have to consider these rations? By the way, I just saw your fourth brother and second niece-in-law. What good things did they bring back from the north this time? Manbao immediately got up and said to her, "You asked a good question, there are a lot of good things, some gems and jade, I will show you later." Chang Yu nodded again and again, "You have to count me cheaper. Whoever is between us, it must be cheaper for you. After you make beautiful jewelry and take it out, you have to tell them that the gems and jade were bought by my fourth brother." Chang Yu nodded happily, "It's easy to say, easy to say." Mingda couldn't help but ask, "Sister, we are going back to the palace to see mother at night, do you still have so much money?" "Don't worry," Chang Yu said, "in a short while, my Zhuangzi and the fief will send this year's harvest." "Mingda, isn't this all delivered in November and December? It's been a few months." Now not only Mingda, but Manbao was speechless, and the two said, "You can't eat your food like this." "No," Chang Yu said confidently, "my shop is already making money, don't worry. After she has made beautiful jewelry, she will wear it for 2 days and then send it to the treasure pavilion to sell. It will only make a profit, not a loss." Manbao and Mingda knew what she was thinking, what else could they do besides applauding? The three got together and talked for a while, and then went to see what Thuro and the others brought back together. Zhou Lejun came over with several boxes in his arms, while Zhou Lejun sat on a chair with a big belly and opened the boxes for the two princesses to see. She mainly aimed at Princess Changjiao. She opened a small box and took out a green gemstone and said, "Princess, look at this color and shape." Chang Yu saw it, his eyes were slightly bright, he lifted the gem to the sunlight to compare it, and then put it on his finger for comparison. Zhou Lejun smiled and said, "When I saw it, I thought, this is the most suitable ring for the princess." Chang Yu got excited, and said to Manbao Mingda, "I think it is very suitable, what do you think?" Manbao and Mingda nodded together, "Which is very suitable, and her fingers are white and slender, and they look good." Seeing that she liked it, Zhou Lejun smiled and said, "The other things are fine, but this one is the most suitable for the princess, so we kept it from the beginning, just to show the princess." Chang Yu nodded proudly and said, "Yes, I want it." Manbao was speechless, "Don't you even ask the price?" Chang Yu said indifferently, 1,000 pieces of gold are hard to buy, I like it, and you won't cheat on me." She said meaningfully, "Our business is still going on for a long time." Manbao said, "At this point, you are so smart again. See you at 6 p.m. Farmer's Blessed Girl." Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2673. Chang Yu returned with a rewarding experience, but even Mingda couldn't hold back and chose a piece of jade, a very beautiful suet jade, and she planned to turn back and let someone wear it as a bracelet. Seeing that it was getting late, Manbao got up to send them out, and Zhou Lejun also carried them to the door with a big belly. Seeing that their carriage was far away, Zhou Lejun was holding his stomach and was about to turn back, when suddenly Manbao quickly stretched out his hand to support her. "What's the matter?" I seem to be twisted to the waist, no, I seem to be bleeding, or the amniotic fluid is broken." And. Manbao glanced at it and said, "Don't be afraid, it should be about to give birth." She said, "It's also the last few days. It's normal. Don't be afraid. You won't be able to give birth for a while. Go, I'll help you go back." Zhou Lejun raised her foot to take a step before she was unwilling to leave. She felt wet and seemed to be flowing downward. She was a little scared and shook her head, No, I can't go." Manbao thought about it too, and quickly turned to look at Bai Shan, who had already sent someone to carry the spring stool. Hearing the news, Xiang Mingxiu ran over. Because he ran in a hurry, his feet were a little lame. He looked at Zhou Lejun with sweat all over his head. He wanted to hug someone, but he knew that he would definitely not be able to afford Zhou Lejun at this time. Zhou Lejun took a deep breath after listening to the aunt's words, and slowly calmed down. She comforted Xiang Mingxiu and said, "I'm fine, I'll wait." The servant quickly brought the spring stool over, and a quilt was spread on it. Man Bao helped her to lie down, and then he supported the spring stool to have her carried to the delivery room. After entering the delivery room, Man Bao showed her a look and said in surprise, "So soon, you're going to give birth?" Zhou Lejun also felt fast, which was different from what my sister-in-law and her sister-in-law had said to her. "Little aunt, didn't you say that it takes a long time to have labor pains before giving birth?" I didn't feel any pain." Man Bao said, "This shows that the child loves you, this is a good child." Man Bao comforted her and said to her, "You don't have to be afraid. Although you are about to give birth, it will take time to open the cervix. You can just lie down and listen to me, and you will be fine." Man Bao helped Zhou Lejun to adjust her breathing, and after making sure she was relaxed again, he went out to ask for Mother Wen. "That's right, the delivery still has to come from the mother, even if Zhou Man is here." Mr. Qian quickly washed his hands and rushed over, and brought a few of Mrs. Fang over to help. This is not the first time for them to have a baby, especially the little Qian Shi, who has been playing a lot of hands when the concubines have children over the years, so they have arranged the outside in an orderly manner. There are brown sugar eggs. Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Zheng also rushed over. The yard was crowded with people. However, it was very quiet in the delivery room. Only Man Bao was busy with Zibing and Mei. When Xiao Qian came in, he wanted to kick them all out. After all, they were all little girls. But she endured it, glanced outside and said, "Your imperial physician office is also true. The Mid-Autumn Festival will not give students a holiday, otherwise there will be Liru at home to help you." Man Bao said vaguely, "I'll let it go after the Mid-Autumn Festival. This time, we have to bring many people from the Imperial Physician's office. To prevent the news from leaking before the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Imperial Physician's office has directly closed it, and students are not allowed to enter or leave. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Emperor's personal expedition will be announced to the world, and they will be able to come out." Man Bao was ready, and after confirming that there were no omissions, she even took out the needle bag and put it aside. She nodded with satisfaction. "Okay, there is no problem, the next step is to wait. Wait until her cervix is open enough to deliver the baby." Wen's mother-in-law's house is not close, although the old Zhou family had already made an appointment with her, but because both of them are the first child, according to experience, it takes a long time to start giving birth after labor pains, so no one has thought about it. People are brought home to raise them. So it still took a lot of time to go back and forth. As soon as Granny Wen arrived, she was about to rush into the delivery room, but was pulled by Mei and Zibing who were waiting outside. She first went to the side room next to her to change her clothes and washed her hands before putting it in. Granny Wen smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't forget it. I changed my clothes on the way here, and I'll wash it when I go in again." She and Imperial Physician Zhou are no longer strangers, and they have been delivering babies for more than 10 years, so they still know the rules. Wu smiled and said, "Don't take it seriously, this is the first time our second aunt has given birth to a child, so I'm a little nervous." After washing Mother Wen, she was sent in. Man Bao was already standing in front of the bed and instructing Zhou Lejun. Zhou Lejun had practiced before, so instead of yelling, he took a deep breath, and after holding it tightly, he followed what his aunt said. "Effort, but it really hurts, it hurts." Even Zhou Lejun couldn't help tears from the corners of his eyes, and Xiao Qian wiped her tears from the side, holding her hand tightly. Man Bao adjusted her posture again, and said to her, You're not using your strength right, take it easy first, I'll let you inhale for a while, hold it back, and then try harder. Wenpo went up to take a look, and Manbao gave her the position. Granny Wen asked, is the fetal position correct? Just. Granny Wen looked at the size of her belly and found that it wasn't very big. She had seen Zhou Lejun before and knew that her pelvis was okay, so she said, don't panic, madam, your belly is not big and the fetal position is right. The cervix will open in a while, and it will be born in a while. Come, inhale, exhale, inhale and exhale, take a deep breath, hold it in, sink down, press down hard. Manbao. If it was the same, why did she lose her strength when she was instructing? Zhou Lejun was clenching his hands tightly at this time, closing his mouth and eyes tightly, and when he opened it again, he went to look at Granny Wen, and followed her movements to inhale and hold his breath. Granny Wen said loudly, yes, yes, just work so hard, I can see the head of the child, come again. Granny Wen shook her whole body, stood in front of the bed, opposite Zhou Lejun, sitting with her hands in large motions, teaching her to breathe in and out. She followed the breathing and inhalation, then took a long breath and held it in, loudly, shouting to make her push harder, push harder. Manbao stared blankly. It was not the first time that the two had cooperated, but she hadn't paid much attention to Wenpo's movements before. Manbao looked at her and looked at Zhou Lejun again, subconsciously wanting to learn, and followed the mother Wen to shake his body up and down, making Zhou Lejun hold his breath and exert force. The little Qianxi on the side witnessed the audience. How did a child raised by one hand become like this all of a sudden? Wenpo said excitedly, come out, come out. She reached out and held the child's head, instructing her to continue to exert force, and the whole child came out in a short while. She quickly cut off the child's umbilical cord, knotted it, turned it around and handed it to Zhou Man, and then went to clean it up for Zhou Lejun. See you at 9. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2674. Manbao opened the child's mouth and made sure that there was no filth in it, then carefully held the child's head and put him into the water. The first time he came into contact with water, his calf kicked subconsciously, his eyes were tightly closed, and his small fist was clenched and moved twice. Manbao simply washed him, and immediately someone spread out the swaddle, and together with her, dried the child with a soft cloth and wrapped it up. Manbao just wrapped it up and remembered that he hadn't cried yet, so he picked him up again and patted his butt. The child obviously didn't expect that he would be beaten, and suddenly he was in pain, and he couldn't help opening his mouth and crying twice. When Manbao heard the cry, he was satisfied and put him in a swaddle and wrapped it up. Mother Wen and MRSGN also helped Zhou Lejun clean up, and Manbao went up to take a look. Seeing that she was in good condition, they held the child to her. Look, it's a boy. Zhou Lejun turned his head to look at him and couldn't help but smile. He looks really ugly, just like Liudu and the others when they were young. Xiao Qian said, children are like this when they are young, don't worry, it won't take long for them to grow up. She smiled and said, our children are not bad. You are good looking, and the second uncle is also good looking, and it will not be bad. Manbao said, this is all my father's credit. MRSGN pursed her lips and smiled and said, it's not. It should be attributed to Grandma Teju. Manbao's eyes were shining with stars, and he couldn't figure out who it was. Zhou Lejun was curious and asked, is Grandma Teju good looking? It's good looking. I heard from the older generation that the best looking one in our Shili Baxiang at that time was Grandmother Teju's. Manbao, our family is so poor, how did we marry Grandpa Teju? At that time, The war was very chaotic. Your great-grandmother's house was hit by a military disaster, and she wandered with people to Bamiguan town. Your great-grandmother used half a bag of wheat to buy people back to be her daughter-in-law. Xiao Qian said in a low voice, "You gave birth to your grandfather, and he was very good-looking. Later, when he married your grandmother, he was also very good-looking." Man Bao, what about my grandmother? Wouldn't she marry my grandpa just because he was good-looking? No, little Qian said vaguely, with a face full of indescribable words, they are a perfect match. As a junior, it is not easy to speak ill of the elders, but the relationship between the Qian family and the Zhou family's predecessors is actually not very good, because the Qian family has really suffered a lot after marrying into the Zhou family. When Xiao Qian was a child, and when she returned to her parents' home after getting married, her mother often talked to her about the older generation. To put it bluntly, the laziness of the Zhou family is in the same line. If we really want to talk about diligence, there are 7 children in this generation, including 8 including Man Bao. Like the Qian family, only Zhou Dalan, Wednesday Lang, Saturday Lang, and Man Bao are the only ones who are as diligent in their bones. The rest have inertia that cannot be washed away. Because Grandpa Zhou was lazy, and Grandma Zhou was even more lazy than Grandpa Zhou. The Zhang family chose the Zhou family, firstly because the Zhou family was pretty good at the time, and secondly because the girl was too lazy, except for her looks. Well, there is no other advantage. Coincidentally, he and Grandpa Zhou caught sight of each other again, so the Zhang family sent someone to the Zhou family to deliver a message. Back then, Grandpa Zhou was more lazy than Zhou. Although he looked really good, it was hard to talk about marriage. In fact, Zhou Jin is not easy to talk about marriage. If it wasn't for Qian's face, who would want to marry such a lazy person? Xiao Qian remembered the incident when her uncle was beaten by her father when she was a child. She couldn't help laughing. She lowered her head and said to Zhou Lijun, who was lying down, "Now that life is good, even if there are lazy people in the family, they can be forced to work hard without being forced. Stand up." Why did Zhou Jin get better later on? He was doing all the work in the family. Isn't it forced by life? Being able to live lazily all the time, who is willing to go against their nature to be diligent and motivated? Man Bao is obviously not familiar with this point, and is still thinking about how good-looking her grandmother should be to keep her descendants so good-looking. Man Bao reached out and touched his little face. The people outside the house have been waiting. Xiang Mingxiu heard the cry of the child for a long time, but there was no movement inside for a long time, only the shrill voices. He was lying on the window and couldn't hear what they were saying, and he didn't dare to ask or scream, for fear of shocking the people inside. But haven't moved for so long. Xiang Mingxiu couldn't help wiping the sweat from his forehead, feeling a little anxious. Bai Shan pricked up his ears and listened to it. When he became thoughtful, he pondered for a moment, and couldn't help shouting inside, "Man Bao, are mother and son safe?" The 3 people who got together to talk about their ancestors reacted, "Oh, I forgot to announce the good news to them." But Granny Wen waited for the dirty sheets to be taken out and washed her hands. She came over and saw that they hadn't taken the child out. She immediately got excited and trotted forward and said, "I'll take it, I'll take it." Granny Wen happily took the children out, only glanced at them at the door, and then received a red envelope. She touched it quietly, and it was quite heavy. Man Bao and Xiang Ming learned, mother and son are safe. Xiang Mingxiu breathed a sigh of relief, then stood on tiptoe and glanced at the swaddled child. Red and wrinkled, it looked ugly, but Xiang Mingxiu's heart softened like water, and he looked at him with red eyes, unable to speak for a while. The good news spread from the backyard to the front yard. Xiang Chao and the others slapped their thighs happily when they heard that the young master had a son, and burst into laughter. After laughing, they couldn't help crying. There were only a few people left in their Xiang family. The son was the only direct descendant. The next generation was finally born. Xiang Chao hugged his head and cried bitterly, then wiped his tears and decided to go out to buy meat, and then he had to ask the kitchen to add vegetables. After Mrs. Lu and others congratulated Xiang Mingxiu, they left one after another, leaving space and time for the two of them. Xiang Mingxiu changed his clothes and went in, sat next to Zhou Lijun with the child in his arms, and whispered to her, "I have given the child 12 names, both boys and girls. You can choose one later." Zhou Lijun said, "Didn't you choose it before? I don't think it's good enough, so I added a few more, and we'll pick another one." Man Bao and Bai Shan went back holding hands. The sunset had already set, and the sky was getting dark. The two looked at each other and Bai Shan said, "Let's go out to admire the moon at night." "There will be no chance to admire the moon tomorrow night." Man Bao nodded. Then they didn't have the opportunity to admire the moon tonight. It might be stimulated by Zhou Lijun's production today, or it might be because their days were already near and it was night. Lu Sunyang also started. Man Bao was taken aback, and asked someone to pull back Po Wen, who had only been gone for a while, and then delivered Lu Sunyang with her. Lu Sunyang's first child was the first child they were used to. It hurt for half the night, and finally gave birth to a little girl in the early hours of the morning, just before dawn. Little Qian hugged her granddaughter, and she couldn't be more happy. There is finally a girl in their generation. Zhou Lizhong was the happiest, his eyes sparkling. "I don't know if I can be half as smart as my auntie. See you tomorrow." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 2675. When Man Bao returned to the main room, he wanted to put on the bed, but was pulled by Bai Shan and dragged directly to the bathroom. "I'll have someone prepare hot water, you wash first." Man Bao can only take a bath first. As a result, after taking a bath, I was refreshed. She came out with her underwear on, and there were some snacks on the table, including steamed buns, and porridge. Bai Shan gave her a bowl of porridge and put it in front of her and said, "Let's eat something first, and then go to sleep. We will enter the palace in the afternoon." It was only then that Man Bao remembered this important matter. He ate the porridge in a daze and said, "These two children have chosen a good date. One was born on August 14th, and the other was born on August 15th. Bai Shan thought so too, and said with a smile, "Whoever forgets their birthdays will not forget their birthdays in the future. It's just unfortunate, it's just in time for the Mid-Autumn Festival, and in the future, I'm afraid that relatives and friends will not have the time to celebrate their birthdays, so they will pass by. So is it a good day or a bad day?" Man Bao went to sleep and woke up after noon. Then wash and prepare to change into the palace. Man Bao decided to follow Bai Shan's advice and wear an official robe. The weather was neither cold nor hot, so wearing an official robe was just right. It was Bai Shan, who planned to go in as usual, because he was a family member. Man Bao said, "By the way, let Zibing go to pack up a new set of clothes and jewelry for Li Ru, and we will pick her up and enter the palace together." Man Bao decided to take Zhou Liru into the palace to see the world. After all, she would also be an official in the court in the future. Bai Shan responded and turned to give instructions. Man Bao brought his family into the palace, first went to the imperial physician's office, and handed over the clothes to Zhou Liru, and asked Mei to dress her up. Man Bao sat aside with a cup of tea and told her two big news. "Yesterday your sister gave birth to a son." Zhou Liru's eyes widened in surprise, and before he could cheer happily, Man Bao continued, "Your sister-in-law also gave birth this morning, and gave birth to a daughter." Zhou Liru almost jumped up and was held down by Mei. "San Niangzi, you can't move, your hair is going to be messy." Zhou Liru followed the little ant in the car to the palace with a confused face, and it took a long while to recover. "Little ant, you have worked hard." Man Bao nodded reservedly and said politely, "It's okay, the birth went well." Then can I go home to see the child tomorrow? That depends on whether Honglu Temple will arrest people tomorrow. While talking, the group arrived at the gate of the imperial city. There were many officials and family members who entered the palace at the same time, and everyone was lining up. Bai Shan was wearing a fancy dress with a ring around his waist. He was sitting upright on the horse. He slightly stretched his neck and looked forward, and he saw the carriage of the Yin family. He waved his hand over there, and the servants of the Yin family saw it. After entering the imperial city, they avoided to wait and waited until the Zhou family's carriage and guards came in before they came out. Gao Yu pursed his lips and watched, his fists clenched, and a guard whispered, "Prince, do you think the news we have heard is true? The Emperor of Dajin doesn't even want to see us, he can accept it our reconciliation." Gao Yu said coldly, "Didn't you listen to that person's hint? Dajin wants more tribute. This is to be cold and we will raise the price. Anyway, let's pass the good news back first, and now the royal court has been there. Urge, and you have to ask the royal court what the reserve price is. Before you come. Before we came, we didn't know that Dajin was so tough this time. We couldn't even give away gold and silver jewelry. Obviously, Dajin was not satisfied with the amount of tribute previously set and had to increase it. It's a pity that he can't fully decide this matter, and he has to ask the royal court for instructions. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, the two countries will definitely have to negotiate. They are Emperor Tiangao, who is far from afraid of Dajin, but he is the grasshopper in the palm of his hand. At the gate of the palace, Man Bao helped Bai Shan's men to get out of the carriage, watched his carriage and horse turn a corner and left the other road, then looked at Yao Yin or, "How dare you enter the palace to attend the palace banquet?" Yin he smiled slightly and said, "My father said that my health has improved a lot, and I am no longer afraid of sitting for a long time, so let me go to the palace to have a look." In fact, it was the old lady who had never died, and always wanted to marry Yin or a daughter-in-law, so she wanted to take him out for a walk and tell the world on formal occasions that Yin Or's health was much better. However, Yin Or did not want to be too deeply involved with another woman and another family, and he was not suitable for marriage. But it is still possible to enter the palace to participate in the palace banquet. He smiled at Bai Shan and Zhou Man, and then he noticed their outfits, so he couldn't help laughing. "Let's enter the palace. Meet your grandmother first." Mrs. Yin also got out of the car. Man Bao and Bai Shan smiled and bowed. Mrs. Yin quickly smiled and said, "Master Zhou and Master Bai don't need to be more polite." She looked at the pair of beautiful men in front of her, and said with some envy, "Master Zhou and Master Bai are really good-looking men and women. In fact, women's talents and men's looks also apply. Anyway, they are a good match." Envious. She glanced at her grandson standing aside and sighed, wondering if her grandson could find such a thing. The Empress has always been lenient towards the elderly and officials who are in poor health, so there are many chariots waiting in the palace gate. For someone as old as Mrs. Yin, after entering the palace, you can directly take the chariot to enter the palace. Otherwise, the old lady is all dressed up on this long road. Even if you don't get tired and lie down, you will be sweaty and uncomfortable. When the cold wind blows back, you should be sick. Mrs. Yin sat on the chariot and immediately pointed to Yin Or, asked him to come up. Yin Or shook his hand and said, "Grandmother, Zhou Man and I just walk slowly, you go first." Bai Shan knew that he didn't want to be with Mrs. Yin, so he smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mrs. We have been studying in the palace for a few years, and we are very familiar. We will catch up with you in a while." Madame Yin could only give up and let the seated carriage go first. They all entered the palace early, and they didn't know how long it would take until the banquet started, so they were not in a hurry at all and walked forward slowly. Zhou Liru also envied Zhou Man, "Little aunt, you wear official uniforms much lighter than us." Man Bao also saw it, and said proudly, "This is called foresight." Zhou Liru pursed his lips and smiled, looking left and right. Man Bao said, "Don't look at it, Lu Shangshu's family may enter the palace later." Zhou Liru had already pointed to the back and said, "Lu Huan." When the group turned around, they saw Lu Huanzhen trotting towards them. No noise in the palace, but I shouted several times, "Why didn't you hear me?" Man Bao, you sure didn't shout out loud, or you could still be here now. Lu Huan was heartbroken. You really want me to be arrested? Lu Huan looked around and asked, "Where's Bai Er?" "Bai Shan, he entered the palace yesterday afternoon." "So you must live in the palace. Where do you need to walk in from the palace gate?" "See you at 6 p.m.